Hey guys, it's Max. In this video, I'm comparing the brand new Retina iMac to the Mac Pro. Now, I've had this Mac Pro for about 6 months now. I've used it for various editing projects, lots of 4K, slow motion, some photography, just daily use, all sorts of stuff like that. So I have lots of experience with it, and it's been treating me really well. Now, this new iMac came out with a 5K screen, which is absolutely gorgeous. But of course, it doesn't offer the same parts, the same amount of cores, and it is more of a consumer machine, not a professional workstation. So I wanted to test it out to see how it compares to the Mac Pro that I've used for quite a while and see if it can handle some 4K editing, transcoding, different stuff like that that video editors do. So this is basically going to be a video talking about video editing. I'll mention photography for a little bit, but I'm not going to be doing just a review on the iMac. There's tons of them out there already. So if you're interested in knowing which one you should spend your hard-earned money on, should you invest in a Mac Pro or will an iMac do the job for you, this is a perfect video for you. So I'll be going over a lot of technical stuff, a lot of numbers, stuff like that. So if you guys want to, you guys can watch that. If not, you guys can just skip to the conclusion. Before I get into all the testing, I want to talk about pricing. Now, a lot of people say the 5K iMac is really expensive, and it does cost quite a bit of money, but you got to figure out what you're getting for that money. Now, that 5K display is expensive, and the only other one on the market is Dell's 5K, and that's $2,200, the lowest price you can pick that up. Now count in the keyboard and the mouse that you get with the iMac 5Ks. That's $2,337 for the monitor, keyboard, and the mouse separately. And if you're looking at B&H, you can pick up the base 5K iMac for $2,349, slightly more than that. So you're basically getting a free computer if you're purchasing these accessories. You want to kind of count that in there. It's a really expensive display. There's only 2 on the market at this time, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. So the unit I'm using here, it costs $3,200. It has the i7, has the upgraded graphics, and 16 gigs of RAM and an SSD. So when you look at the price of the Mac Pro, that's $4,600. Plus, you got to figure in you're going to have to buy a mouse and a keyboard and a monitor, which is not included. So it's about $5,000 if you get a decent 1080p monitor with good color accuracy, keyboard and a mouse. You're looking at about $5,000. So right there alone, we have an $1,800 difference between this iMac and the Mac Pro. So let's go ahead and take a look at the tests. Let's get into the benchmarks. I'm going to start off with Geekbench. If you look at the single score, the iMac has quite a big gain over the Mac Pro, and that's because it has a faster processor for single core performance. It does a better job. Now with the multi-core, the Mac Pro comes ahead, but not as much as I thought. I was quite surprised that the 4-core processor in the iMac gets almost 17,000 points. Looking at Cinebench, which is for more like rendering, stuff like that, the Mac Pro does have a higher score in the CPU, but if you look at the GPU, the graphics inside the iMac, the 4GB M295X, actually does quite impressive compared to the Mac Pro. Looking at this next chart, I added in the 4-core Mac Pro to show you that it's not a great value. That one starts at about $3,000, but you look at the scores, it's not very impressive at all. Even though they both have 4 cores and the Mac Pros is at a decently fast speed, it still does not keep up because just the architecture, it's an older processor basically in there. The new 4-core processor in the iMac is a faster version. So if you're looking at getting a Mac Pro, I would not suggest a 4-core. Do at least a 6 or better. The next thing I want to take a look at is Unigine Heaven benchmark. Now, if you look at the scores, they're very close. The Mac Pro is just slightly ahead, but what I want to know, and this is going to come up later, is the temps and the fan speed. The Mac Pro is running completely at idle, and it's definitely just completely silent. You can't hear it at all. The iMac does have a nice hum going already. It's not full blast, but you definitely hear it, and it could get annoying after a while. And if you look at the GPU temps, they're very high, 98 degrees Celsius on the GPU, and we're looking at 68 and 54 on the Mac Pro. Now, this is one area where people have really marked the iMac down. If you're doing gaming for a long time, it does thermal throttle because that graphics card gets so hot. When the Mac Pro, it's one area it's really good at is just being quiet and staying cool. Next, I wanted to take a look at H.265 and transcoding that to ProRes. Now, there's only one camera that shoots it right now, the Samsung NX1, but this is the future of recording in small cameras, and this is the future of streaming 4K footage online. So we're definitely going to be dealing with these files, if not yet, in the future we're going to be doing it. And it's more load, more strain on your computer than, you know, editing H.264, which we've been doing for a while. So let's take a look at the chart. I have a 1080p 2.5 minute clip, and the Mac Pro is just a little bit faster at transcoding that. And if we look at the 4K 1.5 minute clip, the iMac actually just goes a little bit faster than the Mac Pro. So really close here. Now, next I wanted to take a look at taking that ProRes, the same file, and flipping it back to H.265. So like I said, in the future, you're going to be exporting this. And so you want to make sure to see, you know, what kind of performance you're going to get. So that same 4K 1.5 minute clip is slightly faster on the 5K iMac, but then I actually took 6 smaller clips, 10 to 25 second 4K clips, and put them together to be able to do just a longer export using multiple threads better, more efficiently. And you see the Mac Pro does pull ahead. Of course, it's not hugely ahead, but there's a decent gain right there, about a couple minutes there, maybe 2.5 minutes. Out of all the testing I performed, the biggest stress was this transcoding. So I wanted to see if I can thermal throttle the iMac. This is one thing that people have mentioned if you're doing high performance tasks like transcoding or gaming for a long period of time, the iMac will thermal throttle. So I want to see if I can do it. And the Mac Pro, of course, won't hit anywhere near that. It still stays fairly quiet, but I did hear the fan spin up, which is not very often that you hear it spin up. So let's take a look at some charts. And if you note, the 5K Retina iMac is about 1200 RPMs. That's at the idle speed of the fan at 36 Celsius, and the Mac Pro 790 at 34. So 1 minute into it, you see the iMac is already at 87 degrees Celsius. So that CPU gets hot quick, and the Mac Pro is at 57. At 3 minutes in, the iMac already kicked up the speed of the fan, so it's definitely quite a bit louder now, 95 degrees Celsius, so it's really starting to burn there. You could definitely see what people talk about, that the actual CPU and the GPU from the previous example that I made gets really hot. And if you look at the Mac Pro, you're still at 65, which is getting warmer, but not bad. At 5 minutes, we're still looking the same results for the iMac, and the Mac Pro is up to 69. At 10 minutes, the iMac is already at full speed, 2700 RPM. The fan is loud. Now, the first time I heard it kick up like this, I thought something was going on outside or what's happening, until I realized that's the iMac. So, you know, you have the small body with all the parts in there. It gets really hot, and the fan has to basically be a loud whining kind of sound to be able to keep up with that. So it's still staying right there at 97 degrees. And if you notice, the actual CPU did thermal throttle. It went down to 3.8 gigahertz. It's not a big difference, but it did kick down, which is not good. We don't want it to thermal throttle. If you look at the Mac Pro at 10 minutes, it's at 77 Celsius, still running the same speed, but 790 RPM. It's still at idle. This whole time, 10 minutes, the fan is still at idle, which is something that I love about the Mac Pro. Looking at 15 minutes, where we see the speed of the fan slow down on the iMac to 2400 RPM. The CPU went down a little bit, 96 degrees Celsius, and the speed of the processor kicked back up to 4 gigahertz. And you can see that the Mac Pro is still at idle, 82 degrees Celsius. Now, interesting enough, 30 seconds later, the Mac Pro actually kicked up its speed just a little bit. It's still, you know, barely noticeable as far as the loudness of the fan. If you have the iMac, you don't hear it at all, but the Mac Pro is barely noticeable, and it's at 85 degrees Celsius. So right around 85 is when the Mac Pro kicks up its fan from idle, which is crazy, but they want to keep it quiet. Now there, if you look at the iMac, 2700 RPMs, 100 degrees Celsius. That is really, really hot if you know anything about processors. Not very good, that's all I'm going to say. If you look at the actual speed of the processor, 3.3 gigahertz. So yeah, it does definitely thermal throttle. It's not very good to be able to slow way down like that. It's not very good to have the high temp, but you see the fan kicked right back up. And at the 20-minute mark, you see that the Mac Pro actually slows the fan down a little bit. It's still at 85 degrees Celsius, and we're looking at 3.5 gigahertz. So it slows down 0.1 gigahertz as far as the processor speed, and the iMac is at 2700 RPM, so full blast on the fans, 97 degrees Celsius, 3.4 gigahertz. So yes, the iMac does thermal throttle under heavy load, and like I said, this is the heaviest load as far as rendering, editing, stuff like that I could actually put on this computer. Even doing something like Firmark, or actually Prime 95 that I did, I could not get it to thermal throttle. This is what got it to thermal throttle. I wanted to say I did keep testing after 20-minute mark, and basically the iMac stayed at about 3.4, 3.5 gigahertz. It did still thermal throttle down, and full speed fan in about 96, 97 degrees. So it was able to keep the temp right there, which is really hot. Fans kicked on full blast, and it did stay thermal throttle. The Mac Pro actually stayed at about 950 to 1000, slightly over idle, and stayed at 85 degrees Celsius at 3.5 gigahertz. So I do want to say once again, this is the only time I could get this iMac to thermal throttle. If you're doing normal editing, Adobe Premiere Pro, Final Cut, if you're doing other tasks, the computer never thermal throttled. Even Prime 95, which is a stress test, could not get it to thermal throttle. But doing multiple video clips, transcoding, H.265, which takes a lot of power, after a certain amount of time, it did actually slow down. So keep that in mind. That's one area where the Mac Pro is designed to be a workstation professional computer, to where it's not really going to slow down. 3.5 is actually the rated speed, so it's turbo boosting to 3.6. So I don't know if you can even say that it thermal throttled down. It was just running at the speed it's supposed to be running. So that is the temp test, and this is the only time I really noticed any sort of thermal throttling on the CPU for the iMac. Let's get into some rendering tests. Now the first one is stabilizer test using Premiere Pro and Final Cut. All these tests are going to see both Premiere Pro and Final Cut. And one thing I want to say is the main reason I bought the Mac Pro is to use Final Cut. If you guys watched, I had a couple videos, a series about 11, 12 months ago, and I built a computer. It was over $3,000 called the Mac Pro Killer. You guys could still go check out those videos. Spec-wise, it was better than this Mac Pro. It did cost less. But when I was editing with not with Final Cut, when I was editing with Premiere Pro, I saw that barely any of my hardware is actually being utilized. So what I found out is that even though the Mac Pro has lower specs, when you're editing with Final Cut, it's just the hardware and software work a lot more efficiently together, getting better results. And that's why I actually bought a Mac Pro and sold my custom build. So let's get into some results. So Premiere Pro, I'm using the newest version, took 4 minutes, 19 seconds on the iMac, 521, a little bit longer in the Mac Pro. Now look at Final Cut Stabilizer, 12 seconds. Yes, this is not a mistake. I've tested this multiple times. 12 seconds on the iMac, 10 seconds on the Mac Pro. A lot of people say that the Warp Stabilizer is better than the stabilizer in Final Cut. I've used both extensively. I would not say it's better. There's more flexibility if you want to tweak different options, but as far as speed, this is dramatic. That was the first thing that I got when I was editing some 4K clips. I was like, I cannot wait this long to render my 4K stabilization. I use stabilization quite often because most of my lenses don't have optical image stabilization. I like shot steady. I don't like any jitter in the shots. So that's a huge difference between those two actual programs right there. And like I said, my last computer build was not a Mac. It was, it was a Titan Black Edition, 4.5 gigahertz i7, 6-core overclock, 32 gigs of RAM, SSDs. You guys could check out the videos there. But these results are typical what I got with Premiere Pro. So that's something to take a look at. Both computers for Final Cut are very similar, 12 seconds, 10 seconds. And we have about a 1 minute gain with the iMac if you're editing with Premiere Pro. Next, I just exported a 13-minute timeline, which was the last video I made talking about the new announced NX500, and exporting to H.264, you'll see, this is in Final Cut by the way, 4K to 1080p, is the iMac took 6 minutes and 13 seconds and the Mac Pro took 17 minutes and 21 seconds. Why did it take so much longer on the Mac Pro? Well, the Mac Pro uses a Xeon processor, which is a workstation grade processor, has more professional parts, But one thing that the Xeons don't have is QuickSync. So Intel QuickSync is a dedicated hardware chip basically that makes exporting to H.264 faster. So it's not using just your regular CPU, it's using a dedicated part there. It speeds it up quite a bit. And so the i7 inside the iMac you're seeing here is less than half the speed, and that's basically that QuickSync doing its job correctly. And that's why you see here exporting that same project to ProRes, you do see a little bit faster with the iMac, but the Mac Pro is right there with it, 8 minutes, about 30 seconds longer. So that's what QuickSync does. If you're using exporting to MP4, H.264 for the internet, you definitely see some gains there, and you're going to see this going along. Next, I wanted to test out a 1080p clip. It's a 5-minute clip, and this is without any effects. Starting out there on the left, Premiere Pro, we're looking very similar. The Mac Pro slightly faster. Now you look at Final Cut, the Mac Pro takes 5:30 and the iMac is 1 minute long. There you go. It's doing its job. Final Cut's working really well. So now I'm also showing there Final Cut, no effects with ProRes. You're looking at 42 seconds and 54 seconds with the Mac Pro. Now next, I took that same 5-minute 1080p clip. I applied 2 different LUTs plus grain onto the image to try to push the hardware to have to work harder there. So with Premiere Pro, we're looking at 530 and 508 using the iMac and the Mac Pro. Adding the LUTs, once again with Final Cut, we have 1 minute and 6 minutes. So it took just a little bit longer, not much of a difference adding in those LUTs there. And then Final Cut exporting to ProRes, 58 seconds and 1 minute and 10 seconds. So you guys can look over those charts. Basically with 1080p, Premiere Pro, if you're editing there, the Mac Pro is slightly faster, but not much of a difference. If you're using Final Cut, exporting to H.264, the iMac really pulls ahead here, and exporting to ProRes, which you usually do if you're just doing more editing with that. You don't typically export ProRes to the internet. You get fast speed with both using Final Cut. Next, I'm doing a similar setup, but I'm using a 5-minute 4K clip instead. So using the Premiere Pro, no effects. The Mac Pro, once again, slightly faster. Using Final Cut, the iMac is really quite a bit faster, just under 4 minutes on the iMac, and looking at 14 minutes using the Mac Pro. And using ProRes, exporting in ProRes, we're still quite a bit ahead using the iMac there. Now applying the same 2 LUTs and the grain there, using Premiere Pro, we are faster once again with the Mac Pro. Using the LUTs and Final Cut, we're at almost just about 4 minutes for the iMac and 7 minutes for the Mac Pro. And doing the ProRes export slightly faster with the iMac. So there you go, once again, similar results, just takes a little bit longer because we're working with 4K files. So the last rendering test that I did, I wanted to make it as extreme as possible, as most stressful for the CPUs as possible. So I took that same 5 minutes 4K clips with the dual LUTs applied and the grain, and I cut it into 30-second chunks, and I stacked 4 up. I took a 4K timeline, 4 4K clips, scaled them down, and displayed 4 4K clips in that one 4K image. That's a lot of 4Ks right there, but basically the computer has to view and kind of render 4 4K clips at the same time in one project with a dual LUTs and the grain applied. So let's take a look at the results. Now, this is a 30-second test, and looking at Premiere Pro, the iMac took 11.5 minutes and the Mac Pro took just under 8 minutes. So this is the first time where we're really seeing the Mac Pro kind of move ahead there. You're seeing just a lot more information that has to process, and that Mac Pro is dealing with it better. And if you're looking at Final Cut there, now this is very interesting. 23 seconds with the iMac using that QuickSync, and 1 minute 43 seconds using the Mac Pro. Now the Mac Pro does not have QuickSync. Typically it was similar there to the Premiere Pro test, but this is just Final Cut really leaping ahead. And this is not kind of a missed test or anything like that. I tested this multiple times. This is reality. Final Cut just works really well with these systems. So we're seeing less than 2 minutes using the H.264 with the Final Cut, and almost 8 minutes using Premiere Pro. So if you have the option of trying Final Cut and you're using Premiere, test it out, see what you think about it. And exporting to ProRes, we're looking at 109 on the iMac and 54 on the Mac Pro. So once again, we have a little bit of a lead there with the Mac Pro. So in conclusion, I want to say that I'm really impressed with the iMac after all these numbers and tests that I've done, 3 weeks editing multiple projects, photography, video, 4K, playing with it. It does a fantastic job in most things. It's ahead of the Mac Pro, and some things it's behind, but it's not very far behind. And looking at what you get for the money, $3,200 versus about $5,000 if you're counting in a monitor, a keyboard, and a mouse. You're getting a lot for your money, and that monitor is absolutely gorgeous. It's just beautiful, and the computer performs really well. I've done multiple different projects on there, video, 4K edits, photography. It runs a lot better than I thought. I expected more hiccups because of all the power that the display takes up, but it edits really smoothly. It does a great job, so I think you're going to be very happy with it if you choose to get one of those. So I want to talk about the reasons that you would want to buy an iMac over the Mac Pro. So first off, it has a gorgeous 5K display. You have great performance for the money. It's an all-in-one computer if you don't want to deal with separate monitor and all that. It has that quick sync, which Final Cut Pro uses very well. It handles most 4K edits. So almost, if you're a person wondering which one you should get, 95% of the projects you're going to throw at it, it's going to handle without an issue, unless it's something absolutely crazy, multicam 4K with lots of LUTs and effects and stuff like that. It's still going to handle it. It's just going to take a little bit longer, which is definitely expected. And another reason, it has better resale value. The Mac Pro is not as wanted by as much consumers. The iMac is much more of a consumer computer, which means that the value is going to stay up. Not as much people want to buy the Mac Pro, so the value of resale does go down a little bit. So keep that in mind. Now, here are some reasons you might want to buy a Mac Pro. So one, it's portable. Now, this is one big reason that I have it, is I actually take it almost every single day to work from my home, and I bring it back home. I just grab it, take the cable, roll it up, put it in a backpack, keyboard, mouse, and I'm on my way. Very easy, lightweight, it's super small. So if you need something that's portable, if you're moving it around, definitely a huge upside. And that alone could be a reason that you buy the Mac Pro. Okay, another reason, 6 Thunderbolt / display ports if you're using multiple displays, if you're using lots of different external drives, different stuff like that, that might come in handy for you. Future upgrades, the iMac, basically all you can do with it is add in more RAM. Other than that, you got what you got. The Mac Pro, you can of course add in more RAM, you can swap out the SSD to a larger one, and you can even switch out the actual processor itself. If you buy a 6-core model, down the line you can actually pull the 6-core CPU out and put a 12-core or a 10-core in. So if you want it to last a long time, be able to upgrade it, that might be a reason for you. Large complex projects like the last one we looked at, if you're always dealing with really heavy, huge projects, lots of effects, tons of rendering, it is going to move ahead over the iMac. Constant rendering, so this is basically the heat and the speed, the loudness of the computer. If you're constantly rendering 24 hours a day or majority of the time, it's going to do better. It's not going to get as hot. It's not going to get as loud, and that's what it's built for. It's a workstation computer. And going along with that is longevity, of course. It's not going to get as hot, so the parts are going to last longer. The iMac gets really hot, so if you're constantly rendering hours and hours and hours of projects, that could be a huge reason to go with the Mac Pro. Silent operation. The Mac Pro is almost always completely silent. It's just ridiculous how quiet it is. The iMac at idle is silent, but once you actually start rendering, viewing some heavy stuff, gaming, whatever, it gets loud. And lots of money. So that doesn't mean that you should get it because it costs lots of money, but if you have lots of money and you really don't care, why not? In that case, don't buy the 6-core, get an 8-core or a 12-core, something like that. So those are the reasons why you would want to buy a Mac Pro over an iMac. Now that you've watched this video, if you decided that you want to buy an iMac, here are my suggestions to the specifications that you want to get. So if you're a photographer, you don't necessarily need the highest end iMac. Even the base 2349 model that you can get at B&H with that link you guys see right there is going to be just fine. Photoshop will use some hyper-threading of the i7, but there's not a huge gain in noticeable gain in speed. And if you're using Lightroom, which a lot of photographers use, that really is not going to get any performance gain. It doesn't really use the multiple cores, hyper-threading, all that stuff. The i5 is going to be just fine for you. So you can get the base 2349 model at B&H, and it's going to perform well. The only thing you have to decide really is if you want SSD, if you have external storage, or if you want to pick it up with a Fusion drive. I think either one is going to work fine for you. Now, if you're a video editor, I strongly suggest that you spend the extra money to get the i7 and the better graphics card. For video editing programs, they're definitely going to take big advantage of that extra power that you're going to give it, and you definitely don't want to limit yourself. If you don't have enough money yet, I would say just wait a little bit, save up for the better parts. So I suggest getting the 4 GHz i7 processor, and this is another huge suggestion. Make sure you get the better graphics card. Especially with this huge display, you need the extra memory on the graphics card, and you want the extra power for your video editing. Final Cut and Premiere Pro will both use those graphics cards to speed up your editing and rendering. Now the M290, now that graphics card is actually about 3 generations old. It's been renamed, but the architecture, what it's based off of, is really old, and it's a lot less efficient, a lot less powerful, even though the name sounds almost the same. The M295X is what I have in here, is a brand new card. It's not released in any other computer yet. Apple's the first one to use it, and it's quite a bit faster, and it's basically brand new, and it has double the actual video memory. So this is 100%. Don't go without it. Make sure you get this better graphics card. Now, the SSD or Fusion drive, that's up to you, depending what you do. If you have an external hard drive or a RAID setup that you edit off of, maybe you'd want to get like just the SSD 256 gig and edit, keep your footage on another hard drive. Or if you want to get like the 3 terabyte Fusion drive, you can go ahead and get that. I think that will still perform well. And as far as the RAM, I would say at least get 16 gig if you're doing 4K editing. You really want the extra RAM to make sure it doesn't slow down significantly if you hit that limit. Now, here's some other information that I would suggest to you. If you want more RAM and you want to get a better price on it, do not buy it from Apple. Do not buy it from the stock configuration. B&H has some fantastic deals on RAM. So if you want about 16 gig of RAM, what you could do is you can get the 8 gigabyte model and buy another 16 gigabyte 2 sticks separately. So if you pay an extra $120, you can actually have 24 gigabytes of RAM total, which is great. And it's only going to cost you 120 bucks over the base 8 gig model. And I have a link there you guys can see. So Apple charges 200 bucks to go from 8 to 16 gig. You can spend 120 and get 24 gigs. That's basically the gist of it. You guys see that B&H link right there. And if you want 32 gigs of RAM, you can actually spend, it's $240, and you can get a 32 gig kit, and it's very easy to swap this out. And you can actually just resell the 8 gigs that you have in there. If you want to sell it for 40, 50 bucks, you'll sell it really quick. That's a great price for it. And basically, you save a lot of money. Apple charges $600 to go from 8 gigs of RAM to 32 gigs of RAM. And for $240, you can buy a set of 32, and then you can resell your 8. So that's what I'm trying to say, guys. You can save a lot of money by going this route, and it takes literally about a minute and a half to just a little cover in the back. You can pop in those extra RAM right there, and you can save yourself quite a bit of money. So those are my suggestions if you're getting the iMac. If you're getting the Mac Pro, definitely get at least the 6-core model. The $4,000 6-core model with the D500 graphics cards will do you well. If you can afford getting 8-core and you do heavy video editing, that would be another better option to do there. To finish off this video, if you're buying a 5K iMac, I suggest you guys buy it from B&H. Now, here's a couple reasons why I personally think B&H is the best place to buy Apple products. So first off, they have a lower price. So the base one is about $150 less than if you buy it at Apple. So that's a big savings already. They do sales at times. So right now they have $300 off the 3 terabyte Fusion Drive model, which is definitely a good way to go. They include 6 months of Parallels, which you can run Windows. So if you have different programs they have to access that are specific to Windows, it's very easy to be able to do that. They have no sales tax out of New York. So that's a big deal because Apple charges sales tax to all the states that have sales tax. So this could save you between $100 and $400. If you're outside of New York, that's a big savings right there, and you can of course apply that to getting extra RAM or whatever else. Now here's another big one. They have free 1 to 3 day expedited shipping. Now a lot of online retailers that have free shipping will take forever. They'll say free shipping and it's like a 2-week shipping, and nobody wants to do that. So you end up spending $20 for shipping anyways, or more depending how big the product is. So you get free 1 to 3 day shipping. So if you're in the states that are close to New York, free 1 day shipping. I mean, that sounds ridiculous. If you're kind of in the Midwest area, then you get free 2 day shipping. And if you're all the way on the other side like me in Washington State, you get free 3 day shipping. So that is definitely awesome. And the last one, it supports my channel. So if you guys buy through one of those links, I get a small kickback, and I definitely appreciate it because these videos take a lot of time, effort to be able to test something out, make the videos, make sure it's good information for you guys, it's accurate, stuff like that. So I definitely appreciate it. If you guys want to buy through one of the links that I'll have in the description, you guys can click on that, pick one of these up, or whatever other product you want, and that supports what I do. So thank you guys very much for doing that, and thank you guys for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, give it the thumbs up, and if there's somebody you know or somebody online that's wondering if they should get the Mac Pro or if they should get the iMac, you guys could share this video with them. If you guys have any questions or comments, throw that in the comments below. And that's it, guys. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you guys subscribing. If you guys want to see more videos on computers, video editing, photography, accessories for filmmaking, stuff like that, make sure you subscribe to my channel so you don't miss out on other awesome videos that are coming up. So thank you guys for watching. I will see you in the next one. Peace.